Big time main event coming up this weekend at Bantamweight. We have Rob Font taking on No Love Cody Garbrandt. Matt, one half of your hosting duo. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at Matt Allen FNP. As always, myself, Craig Allen FNP over on the socials. Now, Matt, absolutely love this fight because it's an all-action type of pairing. You get the great boxing from Rob Font. You get a guy that has a win over the current Bellator Bantamweight champ Sergio Pettis in a fight that wasn't all that competitive. I mean, Font, it was absolutely his night that night. And if you look at the 5-on-in, only one loss to Rafael almost 3 years ago. The win over Pettis, one over Ricky Simon. His last time out, he finished Marlon Moraes in a fight that wasn't all that competitive for Marlon at the end. I mean, Rob Font poured it on. It was a great win. New England cartel on the map, if they weren't already, with Calvin Kattar and Joe Lozon and Tyson Chartier and everybody else.
The boys.
But really, for Rob Font, he looked amazing in that performance. And for Cody Garbrandt, he had those 3 losses. He didn't look great in them so much. And then in his last time out against Rafael, really good fight. And then at the end, I've never seen somebody go so full extension on a shot like that. It was Aaron Pico-esque. And it was disgusting. Garbrandt has that hype. But the trouble is, that fight was almost a year ago. 11 months and a week ago. He had COVID, long haul symptoms. You hate to see it. Like, it's really unfortunate for an athlete like himself. I'm just glad we get this fight.
No, I couldn't agree more. This fight really is going to be a fun fight because it's been a while since we've had a fight like this. Now, we have had one other one this year, and I'll say it in a second. But Garbrandt Rob Font might actually set a record for least amount of kicks thrown in a 25-minute fight, between two primary strikers, because neither guy is in love with the kicks. Two primary boxers, and this fight really does remind me a lot of when Calvin Kattar fought Max Holloway earlier on in the year, because that was the conversation leading into that fight. Who is the better boxer? Is it the Calvin Kattar, who has more of a boxing background, I guess, or is it Max Holloway, who in MMA primarily uses his hands? Now, we learned that night that Max Holloway might be the greatest striker ever, but I do think this fight is going to perform and deliver the same kind of fireworks that one did. Because with Cody Garbrandt, I'm going to call this the Jimmy Manuwa effect, but it probably should be known as the Cody Garbrandt effect. Because when Cody Garbrandt wins, it's probably by knockout. When Cody Garbrandt loses, it's also by knockout. He is one of those kill or be killed fighters. I know the story with Garbrandt always is the mentality. It's, what is Cody Garbrandt feeling like fight week? Is he going to be that hothead who's going to go in there and just disregard his own chin and well-being, looking for the knockout, and that's normally the version that gets knocked out? Or is it going to be the patient Garbrandt that we saw in the Sunsao fight? It's really hard to say, and I do feel like Garbrandt's one of those unique fighters who it really depends on what the build-up is to see what version of him we get in that fight. I do think he's one of those fighters who you can kind of rile him up before the fight and make him fight in an emotional way. Now, I say all of that, and he is one of those fighters you can take advantage of. Rob Font's not going to be the fighter who takes advantage of that X factor. I don't think Rob Font's ever talked crap in his life before. Like, Rob Font just seems like a real nice, regular dude for the most part.
I saw him one time in Bangor, Maine, at an auditorium, getting ready for a fight.
There you go, Rob Font, just like you and me. But no, I do think this fight's really fun. But the thing that you do have to ask yourself, I'm going to even ask you, how much weight can you put into that Moraes win? Because that was a Marlon who had just got wheel kicked by Corey Sandhagen like 3 weeks earlier. I know it was like 2 months, but still, it was him on a quick turnaround. Knowing what we know now about Marlon, he is a little bit chinny. It's just, with Rob Font, he is riding this crazy high after that Marlon win, and it was a beautiful knockout, don't get me wrong. I just feel like we're putting a lot of weight into a performance where we don't really know what version of the opponent he was locked in there with. Because with Marlon, yes, he does have great power, he's got great speed, but he's known as a bit of a glass cannon, and the fact that Rob Font was able to catch him early, and the fact that he was coming off a knockout loss so quick, maybe I'm diminishing the win too much, but it is something that concerns me.
It's a great win for Rob Font, and then you look at the other two. So I put a lot of weight in the Sergio Pettis fight, because before that, he had the fight with Benavidez, he had the fight with Cejudo, like, he had fought some big names, still really young in his career. That was a weird thing that, like, the UFC even said, hey, consider free agency. Yeah, go over to Bellator, have fun, see what happens. Great things happen, that's what happens. But you look at that win, that's a great win. You look at the one over Ricky Simon. I have a hard time with Ricky Simon. He's my Casey Kenny. Like, where are you really in this division? How good are you? Because I know he can wrestle. I know he can strike. He did that in his last fight against Brian Kelleher. Like, it's just really tough to tell what Simon you get. Font was on both of those nights. Font was really on against Moraes to the point where he finished him. Garbrandt was really on against the Sunsao. How's his gas tank going to be in this fight? Like, what's he really going to look like? I do have a really hard time trying to tell you how good Cody Garbrandt is. Like, again, depending on where you fall on the subject, like one of my favorite pitchers for the Boston Red Sox, Eduardo Rodriguez, lost a whole season because of, the heart inflammation that he incurred due to COVID. So it's really tough to tell with all of these things. For Garbrandt, he's been off for such a long time. There was a rumored move to 125. He was going to fight Davison Figueiredo. It never happened. Like, Cody Garbrandt's had a weird calendar year. And now he's in a fight against a guy that fights fairly similar to him. I mean, for Garbrandt, again, use what got you to the dance. It's his boxing. You look at the fight against Thomas Almeida as a bit of a precursor for what was to come. But again, Augusto Mendes, great jiu-jitsu practitioner, finished him. Marcus Brimage in the debut, finished him. Beat Henry Briones. That's neat. Beat Takeya Mitsugaki. A little long in the tooth, but he finished him. Looked amazing against Dominic Cruz. It was that Gavin Tucker, Sam Cecilia type performance.
5 years ago.
Really, Garbrandt was the one that did it. Lose to Dillashaw, lose to Pedro Munoz. Now, he was able to rock Dillashaw, and then he got rocked, and then they had the rematch, which seemed kind of silly at the time, because you just beat Cruz, and you only had the one fight. Like, it was a little early. But anyway, they did it again. It was a fun fight. It was exciting while it lasted. And then Pedro Munoz, they decided, hey, we're just going to be boxers, and we're going to strike. We're going to rock each other, and then Munoz ended up finishing him the same way that Dillashaw finished him. Kind of gross. Watch out for the right hand, right? Just look out for them. They're coming. Great fight against the Sun Sao, who was long in the tooth. So now we're at this point where we have two great boxers. It's tough to tell what we're going to get out of Garbrandt. It's tough to put too much stock into some of the Font wins. But they're both right at the top of the division. It's a weird fight.
It is, and I'm really happy you brought that up, actually, because these are two guys that they're going to call contenders, or, the winner of this title shot. No, I don't think they deserve it. For all those reasons that we brought up, like, I do think Cody Garbrandt, even if he knocks out Rob Font in the first round, like, you still need another win, I think, or maybe even two more, because the things that I think about when I think about Cody Garbrandt are him saying a bunch of dumb things on a microphone, and him getting knocked out a lot. And when I look at the top of that division, it's still TJ Dillashaw. It's guys like Corey Sandhagen. It's guys like Petr Yan who, like, you think you're good at striking. Well, Petr Yan doesn't get hit clean ever, and when he touches people, they automatically drop to the ground.
Legally or illegally.
Legally or illegally. And Corey Sandhagen, I don't know if you've been following along, is also a very dynamic and well-rounded striker. So I just look at Rob Font and I look at Cody Garbrandt. Yes, you might be able to beat out kind of your polar opposite. Not your polar opposite, but you might be able to beat out yourself in this division. But both these guys still just bring I'm the best boxer in the division now. When you fight Corey Sandhagen, you better bring more than just hands, because he is a guy, he's going to stand at such a range, he's going to kick you on the way in and make you punish when you do come in. Last thing on this fight. I really think this fight comes down to who lands first. This is one of the most heavyweight fights you'll ever see at bantamweight. And I don't say that because both guys have a ton of power, which they both do, but neither guy's the most durable in the world. Like, Rob Font might not have the knockout losses on his record, but even look back at the Rafael Sun Sao fight. Like, a Sun Sao's not a power puncher by any means, and he dropped Rob Font in that fight. I've seen Rob Font get hit, and I've seen Rob Font get hit clean to the point where I worry about his durability a little bit, to the point where if a guy like Cody Garbrandt hits you, then you're definitely going to hit the ground. Think of Michael Chandler, for instance. Michael Chandler's the guy who, oddly enough, we've had a decent read on his UFC career, so we can pat ourselves in the back a little bit. But yes, his power might be a 10 out of 10, to where if he hits you once, you're going to go down. But the fact that his chin isn't on that level means that anyone can also knock him out. Cody Garbrandt's that same fighter. If he lands on you, you are going to go down. I don't care how old he is, how young he is, or what stage of his career Cody Garbrandt's at. He still has crazy hand speed for this division and God-given power. But with Rob Font, he's got those long-range techniques that can catch Garbrandt on the way in. So my last question, or I guess this is how I'll hand it over. Do you think Cody Garbrandt can get on the inside of Rob Font, or is Rob Font going to knock him out before he gets there?
6-inch reach advantage for Rob Font. Like, it's significant, and if you want to go numbers, I mean, Rob Font, huge strike advantage in terms of the differential at about a plus 1.5 or thereabouts. For Cody Garbrandt, 0.02. And listen, a strike defense, 65% in the UFC, that's great. Again, consider level of competition, but also Cruz and Dillashaw and Munoz. And again, for the takedowns, Cody Garbrandt, they were feeding that fed horse in the build-up to his title fights. Listen, I've got that high school wrestling pedigree.
They act like he's Kamaru Usman.
I can stop all these takedowns. He does have 100% takedown defense. I don't see Rob Font going for takedowns in this fight. They're probably going to slug it out on the feet. If Garbrandt is the patient reserve Garbrandt, maybe he wins. If Rob Font's able to kind of use those prodding techniques that he's been known for, Rob Font wins. Hand speed's going to play a factor into this one, so if we do have a look at the odds, they're close. You knew they were going to be close. Font open to -125, he's -112. Garbrandt open to +105, he's -110. So it's basically a pick 'em fight. In terms of the Tapology votes, 1,134.
Wow.
58% Font, 85% have him to win by knockout. 42% Garbrandt, 79% have him to win by knockout. Probably not going to go to a judge's scorecard, and if you're playing along at home and you want to know what the odds are for that, fight doesn't go to a decision, -275, -260. So if you want to go with that, go with that. I think, yeah, we're probably going to get a finish in this one. Both guys have great hand speed, so I didn't really answer your question, but what is your pick here?
This is such a volatile fight, because again, at the end of the day, do I think Garbrandt can evade some of those prodding shots of Rob Font to the point where he gets in close, so close, that Rob Font can't use advantage of his big hooks or his straight punches? The thing that Rob Font doesn't have, like, this is why I think Brian Ortega is such a great fighter. Brian Ortega said, I am like God level at jiu-jitsu. I don't really need to get that much better at jiu-jitsu. So what if I figured out ways to either get guys onto the ground, or I figure out other ways to kind of accentuate the rest of my game? So Brian Ortega thought, okay, I'm good at boxing, but when guys get close to me, I struggle. That's when he started incorporating a lot of elbows. So you see Brian Ortega throwing spinning elbows, elbows in the clinch. If Rob Font had those weapons, I'd be so much more confident with him in this fight, because again, for Garbrandt to have success, he's going to have to close that space at some point. And I worry about Garbrandt's ability to take a shot while he does close that distance. So for me, I do have to pick Rob Font, and most likely by stoppage. I just worry about not only the chin of Cody Garbrandt, but just his decision-making in the cage, especially if he does get cracked once and he does kind of see red and he's like, oh, I got to get that back. That's what they always said about kind of like the shoot-to-box guys. Like, that's why Verdum got knocked out by Stipe. He gets hit by that one good shot and he's like, oh, I got to get him back, and that's why he rushes forward. I'm not saying Cody Garbrandt's going to run straight into a straight right, but he is one of those fighters who, if you can rock him and kind of test him in that way, he's going to want to go right back at you and get that one back, and I think that's when you walk into a big counter shot from Rob Font.
And we saw that happen 1, 2, 3 times in a row where he just saw red and just had to go for it and ultimately paid the price of getting finished in those fights. But I think back to Cody Garbrandt, and I think of the footwork, and I think of the head movement, and I think of the things that got him to the dance. And if he can incorporate those, he had the time off. He had even more time off. Again, who knows how long he was training. Again, feeding a fed horse. I was so concerned about John McDessie having so much time off in the knee injury when he fought Ignacio Bahamondes. It really just played with my brain. But I look at a fight like this. I love those things from Cody Garbrandt that got him here. He was able to incorporate them somewhat into the fight with the Sun Sao. He also had the kind of flow like almost I have, but mine's frozen in place. And the full beard. If he comes in with that against a guy like Rob Font, oh my. So I am ever so slightly going with Garbrandt, not for the beard and the hair factor, and again, the bandana. Ooh. I mean, when you bring those things in, yikes. But I do like the speed, I do like the footwork. Both guys, yeah, Rob Font hasn't been finished as recently as Cody Garbrandt has, but again, I do like all of the things out of Garbrandt in a fight like this. It's so volatile. So if it was me on a weekend, on a question mark kicks, fight doesn't go the distance, -265, I like that more. But listen, I won't be that guy. Good. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. I will go with Garbrandt in this fight, ever so slightly.
I have to say one last thing. Cody Garbrandt should never move down to 125. I don't know why that was a conversation. I don't know who started that conversation. I'm telling you right now, Deiveson Figueiredo definitely knocks him out at 125 pounds, because I'm curious about his durability at 135. I don't think he'd be that durable at 125, and I'm pretty sure Deiveson Figueiredo hits extremely hard for that weight class. I just don't want that to be a conversation after this fight. I'd hate to see Cody Garbrandt win a big fight against Rob Font, have the opportunity to really boost himself up in the bantamweight rankings, and then be like, hey, I'd love to move down to 125 and attempt to do what TJ Dillashaw did. It would kind of leave a sour taste in it. Yeah, let's just not make that a conversation moving forward. There's a lot of fun fights for Garbrandt to have at 135. 135 is low-key one of the best divisions in the UFC anyway, so why would you want to subtract Cody Garbrandt from it? But yeah, couldn't be more excited for this main event, although I have Font, you have Garbrandt.
Matt, absolutely love the fight. We differ on the pick. Make sure you check out Question Mark Kicks this Saturday, 2 hours before the prelims. All sorts of great fights. Fingers crossed, none of them fall out. But we're loving this card. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in these matchups, as well as your possible fight of the night. Matt, we love the card. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.